I do not remember deciding to move. One moment the cup was in his hand, small, silver, warm with spiced milk, and the next it was on the floor. And he was in my arms. And the room had gone the particular silence that comes right before every grown man in it starts shouting at once. Someone was screaming for the healer. Someone was screaming my name like an accusation. And underneath it, so quiet only I could have heard it, a voice I had learned better than my own said one word, and it was not the child's name. It was mine. I would like to say I was brave. I was not. I was terrified, and holding on and doing the only thing I have ever been good at, which is not letting go of what needs holding. It started 11 weeks earlier, on a Tuesday, with a boy who was not supposed to be afraid of anyone, and a king who had forgotten how to walk into his own nursery. My name is Wren, and before any of this I was nobody in particular. 23 winters old, laundry rough hands, the kind of face servants have, forgettable on purpose. I had worked in Ashfell Keep since I was 11, first in the washhouse, then the kitchens then, because I had a way with children too young to know they should be afraid of me, the nursery. I liked it there. Children did not care that I had no name worth mentioning and no dowry worth counting. They only cared whether you sang the lullaby with the right ending. I had never once spoken to the king. Ashfell was alpha country, which meant the king's word moved through the keep like weather. You did not question it. You simply dressed for it. Halvar Ashfell had ruled since before I was born, the strongest wolf in 4 territories, a man other alphas addressed carefully, even when they outranked him in everything but the ability to break a man's spine with one hand. None of that was the part the kitchen girls whispered about. The part they whispered about was his son. Prince Bram was 4 years old and had gone through 11 nursemaids in as many months. Noble girls, mostly daughters sent by fathers, hoping a place in the nursery might become a place beside the throne. Each one lasted a matter of days. The boy did not bite, did not scream, did not so much as raise his voice. He only had to look at you wrong, eyes going gold at the edges, teeth changing shape in his mouth before the rest of him caught up, and the girl in question would be gone by supper, weeping into her father's coat about a monster in a crib. He was not a monster. He was a boy whose mother had died shifting to save him from a fever no herb could touch, and whose wolf had come into the world a full season before he had any way to understand it. I did not know that yet, the day they sent me in. I only knew that the housekeeper looked at me the way you look at someone you are fairly sure will not be missed. They did not tell me what had happened before I arrived. I only saw it in pieces, 2 noble girls near the stairwell, both crying, one of them missing a slipper. A steward wringing his hands, and through the open nursery door, low growling that did not sound like it belonged to anything 4 years old. Go carefully, the housekeeper said, which was not comforting. I went in anyway, because someone had to, and because I had never yet met a child I could not out-stubborn. The room smelled of scorched wool and fear sweat, and in the corner, half-shifted, crouched something that was mostly boy and partly wolf, and entirely undone. Fur along his forearms, one eye gone gold, his small chest heaving too fast, the growl coming out of him steady and low, like it was the only thing holding him together. I did the only thing I could think to do. I sat down on the floor, cross-legged, right where I was, and I did not try to touch him. Then I started singing. It was an old washerwomen's lullaby, the kind with no fine language in it, about a moon that always came back no matter how far it wandered. I did not have a good voice. I had a steady one, which I have since learned matters more. Bram stopped growling somewhere around the 2nd verse. By the 3rd, the fur along his arms had gone back to skin. And his eye had gone back to brown, and he was watching me with the wet, astonished look of a child who has just realised no one is going to run. By the 4th verse, he had crawled into my lap without asking permission from either of us, and by the time I reached the part about the moon coming home, he was asleep, one fist closed in the front of my apron like he intended to hold that too. I did not notice the king in the doorway until I finished singing. He was not a small man made smaller by worry, the way I had half expected, imagining some anxious father from the stories. He filled the doorway the way weather fills a valley, and he had not moved, not one step closer, not one step away, for however long he had been standing there. I found out later it had been the whole song. "You didn't run," he said. It was not a question, and it was the first thing the King of Ashfell ever said to me. "No, Your Grace. Everyone runs." I looked down at the boy asleep in my lap, one fist still fisted in my apron, breathing slow, and even for what I was later told was the first time in a month. "He's 4, I said. "He's not everyone." Something happened in the king's face that I did not have a word for yet. I would spend the next several weeks learning that word was the sound a very old door makes the first time someone tries the hinge. I was given the nursery permanently within the week. No one asked if I wanted it, but I did not correct them. Because I did, Bram wanted his door left open at night, and someone within call if he woke reaching for a mother 2 years gone. I could give him both. The king's second, a broad, quiet man named Oscar, who had held Halvar's flank in 3 border wars, came to inspect me on the 3rd day. In the way old soldiers inspect anything they intend to protect. He asked what herbs I kept for nightmares, whether I could stitch a wound if the boy shifted wrong in his sleep, whether I would run if things got frightening. I said I already hadn't. He nodded once, like a man closing a ledger, and after that he brought me tea from the kitchens most evenings, unasked. And I thought, for longer than I should have, that this meant he was on my side, lower in the pack. Everyone still knew where I belonged, and it was not standing close enough to the Alpha's heir to matter. Ashfell's hierarchy ran the same as every pack's. The king at the top, his second below him, ranked warriors, the pack proper, and then the ones like me, who existed mostly to make the ranked comfortable. A laundry girl with her hand in the Crown Prince's future was not a story. It was a scandal, waiting for a reason. Lady Odessa Vantry gave it one within a month. She arrived from the Eastern Territories with 3 trunks and the settled confidence of a woman who had been told her whole life she would one day be Luna. She had very nearly been. 2 winters before Astrid. Before the king's heart had been spoken for elsewhere, and Odessa's family had swallowed the insult and waited, the way families like hers always do, for the world to circle back around to what they were owed. She found me in the corridor outside the great hall the day of the autumn gathering, Bram's small hand in mine, and she looked at the 2 of us the way you look at a stain you intend to have someone else remove. "How touching," she said, to the 3 ladies flanking her, rather than to me. The kitchen girl playing nursemaid to the whole future of the territory. I do wonder what the king imagines he's teaching his son, being raised by someone who empties his chamber pots. Bram's hand tightened in mine. I felt the small tremor start up his arm, the one that meant his wolf was listening too. "I don't empty his chamber pots," I said, pleasant as anything. "I have a girl for that. I only handle the parts of him that matter." One of her ladies laughed before she could stop herself. Odessa did not. The king found me in the library 3 nights later, which I would come to learn was where he went when the crown got too heavy to wear in front of anyone else. I was there returning a book Bram had insisted on, despite being 4 and unable to read, and I did not expect the King of Ashfell to be sitting in the dark with no candle lit, a cup of something untouched at his elbow. "You don't have to make excuses to my second in command," he said, without turning around. "Oscar reports everything to me. I know what Lady Vantry said in the corridor. I wasn't making excuses, Your Grace. I meant it. I know you did." A pause where the next word should have been. "That's rather the problem. I did not ask what he meant. I have found that people tell you the true thing faster if you let the silence do the asking instead of your mouth. My son has not slept a full night since his mother died, he said finally. 2 years, 11 nursemaids. I had begun to think it was permanent, that I had a son who would grow up half a wolf with no one able to reach the boy underneath it, because I could not reach him either, not since Astrid. His hand closed slowly around the untouched cup. And then a laundry girl sat down on my floor and sang to him like it was nothing at all. It wasn't nothing, I said. It's a very good lullaby. That surprised a sound out of him that was almost a laugh, the first I had heard, low and rusted, like a hinge that had not moved in some time. Why does he trust you? He asked. Everyone else, he smells the fear on. Why not you? I thought about lying, or being clever, and decided against both. Because I'm not afraid of him, I said. I don't think anyone's told him that's possible. He looked at me for a long moment in the dark. The kind of look that in a bawdier story would have ended in something neither of us could take back. He did not close the distance between us. Neither did I. He set his cup down instead, gently, the way you set down something you have decided not to break yet, and wished me good night. The days after that fell into a shape I had not let myself want. Bram found reasons to be wherever I was, insisted his lessons happen in the kitchen so I could listen, brought me things from the gardens with the fierce seriousness only a 4-year-old can manage. A stone shaped like an egg, a feather, once an alarming beetle he clearly expected me to keep. Twice I found him asleep outside my door, instead of his own, and both times it was Halva who carried him back, and both times he lingered a moment too long in my doorway before he left. The nursery door itself had been locked every night for 2 years before I came, I learned from one of the older maids. Locked from the inside, by the king's own order, the year Astrid died. I did not ask why. I only noticed that somewhere in my 2nd month it had stopped being locked at all. I did not know yet that a king's grief and a king's advisor can look identical from the outside, both quiet, both careful, both watching. If you want to know whether the door staying unlocked was enough to save us, whether a boy who was not supposed to trust anyone got to keep the one person he had chosen, stay with me, follow the thread here, because what happened next in that nursery is not a story I could have predicted, and I lived it. I found the workshop by accident, chasing Bram through a wing of the keep I had never had reason to enter. He got there before I did, and was already sitting cross-legged on the floor, the way I had taught him without meaning to, in front of a low table covered in wood shavings, and a half-finished carving of a wolf no bigger than my hand. "Papa's," he said, when I caught my breath enough to speak. "He does it at night. He thinks I don't know." The wolf was rough in places, overworked in others, the kind of thing made by someone teaching himself a craft he had never needed before, one late hour at a time. I did not have to ask who had started it, and not finished, because Bram already had, matter of fact, the way children say the hardest true things. Mama was making it, for my naming day. She didn't get to finish. I was still crouched there, the little wolf warm from Bram's hands, when the king found us both. He did not shout. He did not even look surprised, exactly, more like a man watching a door open on a room he had meant to keep shut a while longer. 2 years, he said, and his voice had gone somewhere very far away. I told myself I'd finish it before his next naming day. And then I didn't. And then I told myself I'd never be able to give it to him at all, because every time I picked it up, I was giving myself permission to feel something again, and I had decided that was a debt I did not get to collect. Not after what loving her cost him. His eyes went to his son, then, unwillingly, to me. Not after what it might cost the next person. I understood, all at once, the shape of the thing I had walked into. This was not a man who did not feel. This was a man who had spent 2 years convincing himself that feeling was a weapon aimed at everyone he pointed it at. Something in me went very still and very clear. "With respect, Your Grace," I said, "that's the most cowardly thing I've ever heard a king say." He looked at me like I had struck him, which, in a manner of speaking, I had. "You don't get to decide his grief is a debt, only you get to pay," I said. And I did not soften it, because I was done softening things for people who outranked me. He is 4 years old, and he has already learned that love disappears if he holds it too tightly. You are teaching him that lesson twice, once when his mother died, and again every single day you refuse to finish that carving out of some idea that wanting things is dangerous. I don't care what it costs you. Finish it. He needs his father back more than the pack needs you protected. I had never spoken to anyone that way in my life, let alone a king. A month earlier, I would not have dared. He did not answer for a long moment. Then he crossed the room, picked up the half-finished wolf, and set it in his son's open hands. "Happy early naming day," he said, and his voice cracked on it in a way I do not think he intended anyone to hear. Bram threw both arms around the carving like it might run off, and then, unexpectedly, around his father's neck, and Halvar knelt there on the workshop floor, holding his son with a wooden wolf caught between them, and I stood in the doorway of a room I had not been invited into, and understood that I had just watched something come back from the dead that was not Astrid, and never could be, but was real all the same. Oscar found me in the still room 3 days later, where I had gone to make more of the calming tisane Bram liked before bed. He still brought me tea most evenings. He still asked after the boy with what I had taken all along for genuine care. "The border lords are asking questions," he said, without preamble, about why the crown prince's closest attachment in the world is a laundry maid with no house behind her name, about what it means, that the king has not so much as looked at a marriage contract in 2 years, and now suddenly looks settled and content, and everyone in this keep knows exactly why. Is there a question in there, or just a complaint? The question is whether you understand what you're standing in the middle of. His voice was not unkind. That was almost worse. "This isn't a story about a boy and a lullaby anymore, Wren. It's a succession. Ashfell needs an alliance in the east before winter, or the border lords start wondering if a king without a Luna is a king worth testing. I am asking you, as someone who has watched this pack survive 2 wars, to consider stepping back. For the boy's sake. For all our sakes." I told him I would think about it, because it seemed the safest thing to say to a man built like a doorframe. I did not tell him that I had already decided, in the workshop 3 nights before, that I was done stepping back from anything. The naming day ceremony was set for the turn of the season, the formal presentation of the Alpha's heir to the full pack, and Lady Odessa made certain the whole court knew she considered it obscene that the king's chosen nursemaid, her word, chosen, said like an accusation, would be anywhere near the dais. She went to the pack elders directly. I found out only because Oscar told me, grim-faced, that there had been a formal complaint lodged. That pack law technically required the child be presented by someone of ranked blood, and that the king was refusing to hear a word of it. "He's going to lose ground he can't afford to lose," Oscar said, "over a laundry maid holding a boy for one ceremony. Then maybe the ceremony should catch up to what's actually true," I said, instead of the other way around. He looked at me for a long moment, and something moved behind his eyes that I mistook completely for exhaustion. The naming day hall was full, every ranked family in 3 days' ride, silver and fur, and the particular hush that comes before a king's son is shown to his people. I stood at the edge of it, in a borrowed grey dress, not on the dice, because pack law had won that much. And Bram had made it very clear he did not care what the pack law said. He was not doing this without me where he could see me. Oscar carried the ceremonial cup himself. Spiced milk, warmed, the same as always, the same tradition since before Halvar was born, and knelt to offer it to Bram with his own hands, the way the second in command always did. The moment meant to say the whole pack stands behind this child. Bram took it, looked for me first, the way he always did before anything new. I nodded. He drank. He was on the floor before the cup finished falling. I do not remember deciding to move. One moment the cup was in his hand, and the next it was on the floor, and he was in my arms, and the room had gone the particular silence that comes right before every grown man in it starts shouting at once. I could smell it on him before the healer arrived, underneath the milk, a bitter green thread of wolfsbane root, enough to drop a grown man for an hour, and nearly enough to stop a 4-year-old's heart outright. I got 2 fingers into his mouth and made him bring it back up before it went any further down. Because I had spent 12 years in a still room, and I knew exactly what I was smelling, and exactly what came next if I didn't. The root burned going in either direction. By the time the healer reached us, my hand was blistered, where his sickness had run over it, and I did not feel it yet. And Bram was breathing, shallow but breathing, and someone was screaming for the healer, and someone was screaming my name like an accusation. It was Oscar. She did this, he was saying to anyone who would listen, to the whole silvered hall. She had access. She had the herbs. She, Ren, just my name, Lo, and not an accusation. Halvar was on his knees beside us before I had registered him crossing the hall, one hand checking his son's breathing, the other closing, briefly, hard, around my blistered one. She saved him, he said, not loud, but the kind of quieter room full of wolves cannot help but hear. You are standing in front of me accusing the one person in this hall who acted before the rest of you finished screaming. It was, of all people, Lady Odessa who said it first. He carried the cup himself, her voice cut clean through the noise, and every head in the hall turned, because it was the last voice anyone expected to speak in my defense. I watched him do it. No one else touched that cup between the kitchens and the dais but Oscar. Her eyes, when they found mine, held nothing warm in them, and also, for the first time, nothing cruel. I do not like you, girl. I have never pretended to. But I know what I saw, and I am not in the business of letting a man poison a child and call it someone else's crime. Oscar did not run, and he did not deny it long. Something in his face had already given up the fight before his mouth caught up. I would not have let it kill him, he said low, like that made it a smaller crime. Enough to frighten. Enough that the whole hall would see this keep is not safe, with a commoner running its nursery. Enough that you would finally hear reason about the alliance, before the border lords lost patience entirely. I have bled for this pack twice over, Halvar. I was trying to save it from a mistake you were too besotted to see. You put wolfsbane in my son's cup. I miscalculated the dose. Halvar rose slowly, and the whole hall rose with the change in the air. The particular electricity of an alpha's wolf coming very close to the surface without quite breaking through. You have been at my side since before I had a crown to wear, he said. You will still be the man I remember when I was young enough to need you. But you put your hand on my son to win an argument, and there is no border lord in this hall, no alliance in the east, no version of the succession you were so desperate to protect, that is worth more to me than that boy's life. His voice did not rise. It did not need to. Oscar Vantry. I had not known until that moment they shared a house name, that Oscar was Odessa's own uncle, that the alliance he had been so desperate to force was his own family's, is stripped of rank, exiled beyond Ashfell's borders by sundown, and if he is seen inside them again, he will be met as any other threat to this pack is met. Bram stirred in my arms before anyone else moved, blinking up at me with the dazed, furious clarity of a child who has just been extremely sick and is extremely unhappy about it. "You made it come back up," he said, accusing, which from a 4-year-old who had nearly died an hour before was the finest sound I have ever heard. I did. "You're welcome." He burrowed into me instead of answering, one small fist finding the front of my dress the way it always did, and said, muffled, "To no one in particular. I want Ren to hold me at the ceremony. Not a person of ranked blood." Ren? Halvar looked at his son, and then at the hall full of ranked blood that had spent 4 months trying to explain to him why that was impossible, and then at me. "Pack law," he said, loud enough to carry to the doors, "requires the heir be presented by someone the pack itself has chosen to honour." He crossed the space between us in 3 strides, and knelt, the king of Ashfell, on both knees, in front of every noble house in his territory, not to me but to his son, gathering us both up together, and rose with Bram still in my arms, and his hand closed once more around mine. "I am naming her tonight. Before all of you. Not as a nursemaid. As the woman this pack's heir already chose for himself, and the woman I intend to make his mother in truth, if she will still have either of us after the day we have given her." He turned enough to look only at me then, and every ounce of formality went out of his voice. "Will you?" I had thought, somewhere in the last 11 weeks, about what I would say if a king ever asked me anything. I had not once imagined it would be this simple. "Yes," I said. "Obviously yes. Ask me something hard next time." He laughed, the rusted hinge sound, all the way open now, and kissed me in front of the entire assembled nobility of Ashfell, brief and unpolished, and entirely too public, and I felt something in me that had been braced for 11 weeks, maybe longer, finally set itself down. The fallout was real, and it was not gentle. Osgar's exile cost Ashfell an ally in the east within the season. Odessa's family took it as an insult, regardless of which side of it she had stood on, and pulled their trade routes north for 2 winters before quiet diplomacy mended it. The border lords muttered. A few ranked families left court early and did not return for the spring gathering. Being chosen does not erase the structure you were chosen out of. It only means you spend the rest of your life a little bit argued about, and I have found I do not mind that nearly as much as I expected to. Odessa, for her part, did not become my friend. She became something stranger, an ally who disliked me on principle and defended me on evidence, which I have come to think is rarer and more honest than most friendships I have had. 6 months later, the nursery door stands open day and night, because no one in this keep has needed it locked in a long while. The wooden wolf sits finished on Bram's windowsill. Halvar sanded the last rough edge himself, the week after the ceremony, and did not let anyone else touch it. Bram has stopped shifting when he is frightened, and started shifting when he is delighted instead, which the healer tells me is the more usual order of things. Last week, a letter came from the wash-house woman who trained me at 11 years old, half in disbelief that the girl who used to scrub sheets in her yard was now, of all things, expected to be called Luna by autumn. I wrote back that I could hardly believe it either, and that she should come to the wedding, and that yes, I would still remember how she took her tea. I still sing Bram the same lullaby, most nights, though he tells me now that he is nearly 5 and far too old for lullabies. And then he asks for it twice more, before he will close his eyes. I think about the day I sat down on a nursery floor with no plan beyond not running, and I think, sometimes, that the whole of my life since has been the world quietly rewarding the one thing I have always been stubborn about, refusing to leave, when leaving is the easy thing to do. Halvar says I saved his son twice. I only ever meant to save him once. I have decided not to correct him. A king should be allowed to be wrong about something. Every now and then, especially when it means I get the credit twice. I still wonder, some nights, what would have happened if Oscar's dose had been a little more precise, or if Odessa had chosen her family over the truth in that hall. I do not like where that thought ends, so I do not finish it. But I wonder about you, too. Whether you saw Odessa coming, or whether she surprised you as much as she surprised me. Tell me your theory in the comments. Comment the wolf if you want to hear what Bram says the day he finally meets a sibling. And if you want more nights like this one, a king learning how to be brave in the small ways, a boy learning that love does not have to disappear, a girl who never once ran, stay close. There is more of Ashfell left to tell, and I would rather tell it with you listening. Where are you tonight, while you are listening to this? I would love to know.